Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to another Project Ihya podcast. Um, Today, our special guest is Mufti Abdullah Ibrahim Nana. Mufti Abdullah Nana was born in California and completed his bachelor's from UC Berkeley with a degree in business management. Mufti Nana then traveled to South Africa and completed his Alim and Mufti degrees from the renowned Darul Ulum Azadville. He currently serves as the Imam of Islamic Center of Mill Valley and also teaches Arabic and Islamic studies full-time at a school in San Francisco. He was a guest speaker on comparative religion at the Dominican University, on comparative law at the San Francisco State School of Law, and for an English class at UC Berkeley. Mufti Abdullah has authored 4 books on various topics, including the virtues of Islamic knowledge, stoning to death in Islam, legal rulings on slaughtered animals, and the maidens of paradise. Today, inshallah, he will be sharing insights on his most recent book, Ghazawat Khairuddin Barbarossa, or the Battles of Khairuddin Barbarossa. So, inshallah, first I would like to extend a warm welcome to Mufti Abdullah Nana. Welcome to the program.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmadu sallallahu Rasul Kareem. Amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum to all. I would like to thank Mullah Asadullah and Sheikh Musab for hosting me on this program and giving me a platform. May Allah bless your endeavors, and may Allah bless the Ihya project and make it successful and make it a means of benefiting the Ummah.
I mean, Jazakumullah khair. Now, mind you, the introduction for Mufti Nana could have been at least 5 minutes long. He's mashallah so many things, and we're happy and we're blessed actually to have him here on our platform. He's so much experience working in the community in so many domains. He advises a lot of companies and businesses as well, being a mufti and being proficient mashallah in Islamic finances, as well as on a lot of other issues, especially when it comes to halal meat as well. His name is well known. So alhamdulillah, it's a blessing for us to have him on. So inshallah, Mufti Sahib, we want you to just sort of go into the new book that is going to be published soon regarding Khairuddin Barbarossa. And this is a name, I suppose, not a lot of people know much about.
The interesting thing
about it.
So the interesting thing is that the Europeans know him. The Europeans know him better than we know him.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, when you ask a Muslim about, I guess to list out or to think of any heroic figures in our past, people will, rattle off the names of, and rightfully so, people like Salahuddin Ayyubi, etc. But nobody really knows about Barbarossa. And also, I mean, it's not that long ago. I mean, he was around in the 15th, 16th centuries.
Yes.
So inshallah, the first question I think I have is really why Captain Barbarossa? What drew you to him?
Or maybe we can just give it to Mufti Nana to narrate the story from the beginning.
So I narrate it in a dramatic way. I was teaching a Tirmidhi class, I believe at the time. And you know how students are. Students, they want a distraction, or sometimes they don't want to listen to the lesson. So they'll ask some by the way question, or they'll ask some distracting question so that class kind of chills out, and then you end up talking about something else. So one of my students, we're sitting in Tirmidhi class, and then he just asked me out of the blue, he goes, Mufti Sahib, who was Khairuddin Barbarossa? And I had heard about his name. I'd seen a few articles about him, but I really didn't know much more. So Salahuddin Ayyubi was a hero on the battlefield on land. The main difference is Khairuddin Barbarossa, he was the greatest naval commander in Islamic history. Right? He would spend months on ships, and it was a different world. Right? Cannons, rifles, then boarding a ship, capturing ships, taking on the enemy. So it was a whole different world. So when the student asked me, I was kind of taken aback, and I mentioned a few things. I said he used to scare the Europeans. The Europeans were scared of him. He was a great commander, but beyond that, I didn't have more information. So immediately I began looking, and I saw an English book on the subject, written by Ernest Bradford. The name of the book is The Sultan's Admiral. So I immediately ordered the book. It was out of print. So I ordered the book for like $40-50. I got the copy, and I started reading it from beginning to end. Then my student in class, he said, well, the reason I'm asking you is these famous on TR1, these famous Turkish serials and these famous Turkish shows. Barbarossa is the next one, and it's coming out in about 4 or 5 months. So he's like, that's why I'm asking you.
How long ago?
I read the book. Yeah, so I read the book in English, and I thought to myself, I said, that's really interesting. Yeah, it's the English book is really fascinating, but there is some information missing. So then I just did an internet search, and I found out that during the life of Khairuddin Barbarossa, he dictated his own biography in the Turkish language. Wow. So when I heard about that, it was love at first sight. Honestly, it was love at first sight. So I thought to myself, I need to get a copy of this book. And from my own information, from my own knowledge, I want to get a copy of it and read it.
Is this, Mufti Nana, is this the reason why at one point I think you were looking for someone who can translate Ottoman Lugha al-Uthmaniya?
Yes.
Oh, so this is what you were trying to translate.
So this is the background. So there's a number of obstacles on the way. I found an Arabic translation of the Ottoman book, and I read it. And it was also very interesting as well. In fact, I translated the whole thing from Arabic to English, only to find out that it was a distorted version.
Oh, wow.
So I put on all this work. I translated the distorted version. Then finally, my Ottoman historian friend told me, he said, look, you have to go back to the original. And you needed someone to translate the original from Ottoman Turkish to English. But now the challenge is Ottoman Turkish is a lost language. From the time of Ataturk, he banned the language. So today, very interesting, Erdogan has kind of revived it. And it is taught once again for the last 4 or 5 years. But as a whole, to find a translator from Ottoman Turkish is very difficult right now. Right? As a whole, someone our age, in their 20s or 30, that can read Ottoman Turkish and translate it, it's very difficult. So that was a mission. I ended up losing $30,000 in the way and getting ripped off by someone because I couldn't check their work. Right? So they claimed to have translated it to English. But I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is only 70 pages. The original book is 600 pages, but I couldn't really do anything. So then I had to keep looking around. I met a brother he's a white convert from Ohio who converted to Islam and moved to Turkey. And he's now a translator from Ottoman Turkish. He learned Ottoman Turkish, and he's teaching his children Ottoman Turkish as well.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was a long process.
Is he trying to revive the spoken language or something?
No, I think he's just very interested in Ottoman history.
Okay.
So he learned the language himself. Very interesting. Ottoman Turkish is a combination of Arabic, Farsi, and I think a few other languages as well. And it's written in the Arabic script. With a few variations. So translating the book itself took a good 2 years. Right? It was a process. It took a good 2 years. It took a good amount of money as well. But I think reading it really made it worth it. That you rarely, a person might write a book hundreds of years later or thousands of years later, but this is written by someone who was there. So the author of the book was one of Khairuddin Barbarossa's companions, who was with him for 16 years.
Wow.
So he dictated the whole book. And it covers maybe roughly 40 or 50 years of Khairuddin Barbarossa's life, some of the major battles as well, some of the interesting incidents, some of his miracles as well.
Now, the book of Arnel Bradford, did he not use that autobiography almost?
No.
He used Western sources?
He used primarily Western sources. So and then he didn't know Ottoman Turkish. That's the other thing. So this biography of Khairuddin Barbarossa, it's been translated to Hungarian, It's been translated to Italian. It's been translated to Spanish. It's been translated to a few other languages, but never to English.
Wow.
So this is the first time in history that it's been translated to English.
And
so that's yeah.
Mufti Sahib, did you get the digital version of the manuscript, or were you able to get a
Yes.
hold of? Okay. And
Yes.
was it from the archives from the Turkish libraries?
I think it's a printed book, he's saying.
No, I'm talking about the original.
So what happened was, no, both of you are right. In fact, both of you are right. So what happened was, the book itself, the manuscripts were written, and manuscripts spread throughout the world. So there are manuscripts of the book in Turkey, of course, like about 5. There's one in Bosnia. There's one in the Vatican in Rome.
Wow.
There's one in Austria. There's one in the British Library. And I think Germany also has one, and France also has some as well.
Wow.
Yeah. So we gathered all the manuscripts. But to your earlier point, in Turkey, what they did was they published one of the manuscripts. They published the whole manuscript, so those who can read Ottoman Turkish can read it, and then they transliterated it into modern Turkish. Yeah, so it is available in modern Turkish as well. It's just it's never been translated to English. That's been the challenge.
So what made you want to go to such lengths, to put in money, time, energy, find translators? Like, subhanAllah, I feel like there are a lot of scholars or students of knowledge. Like every day, these kinds of things may pass by people, but you went to such great lengths. Like, why was that? What pushed you for this and not something else, maybe?
Yeah. So I, number one was this interest in Barbarossa and this show on TRT1. Okay. I will say the show is completely inaccurate. Unfortunately, when you say based on historical sources, those shows and movies are really just mostly made up, and only as maybe 5% might be true. So the moment I saw the book, I felt that there would be a demand for it, and I felt it was a lost story. Right? Because Barbarossa telling his own story, you can't beat that. Yeah, compared to any other biography on him, Barbarossa telling his own story, it kind of puts you. It's written in a very captivated style, and it puts you very close to the events taking place. So I felt that there would be a demand and there would be interest for it.
And I guess like if you had waited, like if another generation had passed or 2 generations, like we don't know what would be the state of the language, right? Like it would be much even more difficult to find somebody, maybe.
Yes.
By the way, is Ottoman Turkish, is it now like a field of study in the universities to where they're trying to revive it academically? Is there?
Well, it seems President Erdogan, he's the more religious president. He's already revived it in the schools.
Wow.
So he's instituted. If you look it up, he's instituted that all children learn Ottoman Turkish.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I don't know how successful that's going to be, because where are they going to find teachers? So the challenge is that from the year roughly 1920 till the year 2000, Ottoman Turkish was taught roughly secretly or privately. So yes, I think some people in the university do know it, but as a whole, it is a lost language.
Yeah, I remember I kind of ran into one Ottoman. I was in Turkey, and we were in the Blue Mosque. And a lot of the old structures, they still have the Ottoman Turkish written, on the doorways and things like that. And I ran into this individual, and he was reading out all the poetry for me on the wall.
Interesting.
I just found it real interesting. I was like, man. And he was also making the same point that this is sort of a lost. There's not many people that would be able to read it. But again, I couldn't verify if he was actually if he was actually accurately reading it or not. But it was something interesting. But I have a question about what would be the relevancy for Muslims today in reading the story of Barbarossa? What are the things from his life sort of that they can take lesson from? And
like maybe we can get into the story, because we haven't gotten into that yet.
Yeah. So Khairuddin Barbarossa.
And is he the same one who's in Pirates of the Caribbean the movie, is he the same character that's portrayed there? The
Allah
English
knows best.
equivalent? Okay.
Yeah, so I haven't watched Pirates of the Caribbean, and I'm not too familiar with it. But yes, you could say that he is a larger than life personality.
Yeah.
And going back to Asudallah's question, I think we're in a time where Muslims need a morale boost, and they need to be proud of who they are. And we're also in the need of heroes. So I think Salahuddin Ayyubi has played that role, rahimahullah. But I think there's many other individuals like him as well. There's many other individuals like him. Khairuddin Barbarossa, as I mentioned, there's more written about him in the Western sources than in the Muslim sources. Or, right, they were amazed by him, right? They were absolutely amazed by him. And in fact, they say the children at that time, he was the bogeyman. So in Europe at that time, if you want to scare your kid, you tell him, you better behave, or Barbarossa is going to come after you, right? He was the boogeyman of the time. So his history is.
And is this for the English or for the Muslims?
Like for the British and for the Europeans.
Oh wow!
I think even Bradford mentioned in his book that the westward expansion the eastward expansion of Europe. It wasn't a lot. They mentioned that it wasn't, or Bradford mentioned in his book that it wasn't because of like scientific discovery and all that. It was because they were trying to get away from having to face, the Barbarossa brothers and things like that in the Mediterranean. So they were looking for other routes, and that's how a lot of these other routes opened up towards the east.
Yeah, so very, very interesting. The Spanish, what they say about the Spanish would go to the New World. They would bring in this gold, silver, and resources. And Barbarossa and his team, they would confiscate it all. Yeah. So many people refer to Barbarossa as a pirate. In fact, the European sources do. We will call him a Ghazi al-Bahr. Right? So he was in holy jihad. And he was a pirate would assume he's completely independent. He operates on his own. No, Barbarossa operated under the Ottoman Empire. So really, Barbarossa's history and book is part of Ottoman history. Right?
So it's basically like an economic blockade on the Western powers of that time. He was the head of the spear.
Yes.
So can we go to the very beginning of the story, right? Because I want to have a clear time when we start the story from the very beginning and kind of like who was he, in what context was he born, and go from there until the end.
Sure. So Barbarossa and Khairuddin, he grew up in the island of Lesbos, right? So you guys, I didn't make up the name. The name is Lesbos. It's an island off of Greece.
Yeah.
And roughly around the year 1460, 1470, Sultan Muhammad Fatih conquered this island off Greece. Right, so he conquered this island, and of course he also conquered Istanbul as well. So this island, as he conquered it, he took some of his soldiers and he assigned them to oversee this island. So they were there. They were in a foreign island. They're by themselves. So finally, they wrote a letter to the Sultan and said, "Look, it's very difficult for us to live here. We're single men. We have needs to the nearest effect." So Sultan Muhammad told them, "Yes, I give you permission. You can marry one of the local women and family, because yes, if you're going to live there in the long term, you need to establish a family." So Khairuddin Barbarossa's father was also a Muslim soldier. He was there for many of these conquests of Sultan Muhammad Fatih. And on the island of Lesbos, he married the priest's daughter. Right? So he married the priest's daughter. He had 4 sons. Aruj is also a famous name as well. Aruj was the one-handed pirate. I will explain that shortly. So Aruj was one of the brothers. Ilyas was one of the brothers, and Ishaq. And all 4 of these brothers played a prominent role. And the area they grew up in, right, they had Greek blood in them, so they had red beards. So the name Barbarossa in Spanish means red beard. So they were given this nickname because of their bright red colored beards.
Wasn't one of the brothers' names Khizr or something?
Correct. So Khairuddin, his original name was Khidr.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's just another name. And then later on, he became famous in the Western sources. His name is famous as Barbarossa.
Interesting.
So then, okay, that's where he grew up. And how did his, like what happened after what? How did his naval career begin? And
So initially in his biography, Khairuddin and Khidr, they were businessmen. They would do sea trade, and they would go to various ports close by, for example, in Syria, for example, in Egypt, and they would trade. Then everything started once I believe Ilyas and Aruj were at sea, and they were captured by the the Crusaders of Rhodes. I'll specifically use that written term, the Crusaders of Rhodes, the Knights of St. John. The Crusaders of Rhodes captured Aruj and killed his brother Ilyas outright. So Aruj was captured. He eventually escaped, but you can say in his heart, he had a grudge, or he had unresolved issues with the Europeans and the people of Rhodes, the island of Rhodes. So they decided to go to war, and they decided to attack the Europeans and go to war. So eventually, both brothers, they made their way to North Africa. So really, the story of Khairuddin Barbarossa intersects with many different aspects of history: Ottoman history, Algerian history, Tunisian history, and North African history as well. So then they went to North Africa. They conquered Algiers, and then they came under the protectorate of the Ottoman Empire. So the Sultan recognized these areas, and then they eventually Khairuddin Aruj passed away, rahimullah. He passed away in battle, but Khairuddin was promoted as the Grand Admiral of the Ottoman Navy. So he represented the whole Ottoman Empire, and he took on the European forces on multiple occasions, and he won one of the greatest battles in history, the Battle of Preveza in 1538. He defeated the entire European forces, including the forces of the Pope as well.
MashaAllah.
wow.
Very interesting, subhanAllah. And it's also interesting to note that he comes actually from like a Christian background. That you mentioned, his mother is the daughter of a priest. I think his father was one of those Janissary soldiers.
So some people argue, does he have any Muslim blood in him or not? His father and grandfather both were Muslims, but it looks like before that they also have European blood. Right? So Islam came to his family, but I guess this is the beauty of Islam, that there's equal access for anyone. Anyone wants to become an Islamic hero, the door is open. Right? Whether you're born Muslim, whether you recently converted Islam, the door is open for all.
Islam is able to solve the identity and race problem. It has the potential, right? If it's implemented properly, and it can leverage all ethnicities and their inherent talents and strengths.
And arguably, the Ottoman Empire was very skilled in doing so. Right, the special group of soldiers, the Janissaries or the Sipahis, they were specifically trained. They were ready to give their lives for the Ottoman Empire. Right, but they were expert soldiers. If you look at them, there was specific soldiers whose job was to build trenches underneath the enemy forts and then blow them up. And sometimes they would,
And I also read that he also lived during the time of Suleiman the Magnificent, if I'm not wrong, and he was one of the main reasons why he attained such glory, because because of his naval successes.
So the relationship between the two of them, roughly the year 1534, the Sultan Barbarossa was already operating under the Ottoman Empire, and he had sent letters back and forth. But there is a fairly long distance between North Africa and Istanbul. Like if you look at the Mediterranean, so then the year 1534, Sultan Suleiman al-Qanuni, also known as Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, he sent a letter to Khairuddin Barbarossa. I want you to leave someone in North Africa and come to Istanbul. And he was brought to Istanbul. He became the Grand Admiral. And specifically in the naval battles, because Sultan Suleiman, to be fair, he himself would go to battle as well with the Ottoman army. And we know Vienna, Austria, Hungary. So Sultan Suleiman himself went to battle multiple times. But you can say part of his genius, we can say, is in two aspects. Number one, he saw the skill set of Khairuddin Barbarossa, and he brought him to specifically serve the Ottoman Empire in Istanbul. And the second most powerful thing he did was Sultan Suleiman al-Qanuni, he started documenting Ottoman history. So he's the one that sent a letter to Khairuddin Barbarossa towards the end of his life, and he said, I want you to document your life. I want you to dictate it or document your life and send me a history of your life.
Subhanallah.
He did us a favor.
He did. He did us a favor.
Is it possible for you to get into just a synopsis of the Battle of Preveza? I remember you said that that's basically his greatest military sort of victory.
Yeah.
If there's any, sort of like if you can give us the broad view of that battle, what happened exactly? Yeah.
So the summary battles in those days really were extension of the Crusades, right? The Pope is involved. It's all of Christianity versus all of Islam. So the Pope gave the battle cry that we're going to take on the Muslims and we're going to destroy Barbarossa. So Preveza is a port. It's that used to be an Ottoman port off of Greece, and it's also a very fortified position, right? There's a bay, and there's only one opening to come in.
Mm-hmm.
So Barbarossa was vastly outnumbered, right? So you can say I would compare Preveza to what Khalid bin Walid did in the Battle of Muta, right? And I'll explain. I'll make the parallel more in detail later on. But Barbarossa was vastly outnumbered, right? He knew that the enemy had the upper hand, but he took up a very strategic position, a very defensive position, and he waited. So the enemy fleet came all the way to the port.
Do we know the numbers on each side?
Roughly, I mean, Barbarossa must have had somewhere around 80 to 100 ships, and the enemy had maybe 300 ships. And large ships, right? Extremely large ships. So Barbarossa waited out. He knew that he, as they say about him, he knew the Mediterranean like the back of his hand, right? He grew up in the Mediterranean. He was born on an island on the Mediterranean, and he participated in battles throughout the Mediterranean. So he knew the Mediterranean. So he picked the best spot for his army to succeed. So what he did, he waited in Preveza, and it was going to be a stalemate. Either he leaves the bay and he goes out in the open ocean, at which point he risks, he puts his army in danger, or he waits for the enemy to make the move and then he chases the enemy. Right. So he did the latter. He waited inside the safe port, and once the enemy left, he chased the enemy, and then he took on the enemy.
So the enemy didn't make the mistake of coming inside of the bay.
They didn't, because the Muslims had the fort, they had the cannons, so they were ready to take them out as soon as they came in.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he pursues them as they're leaving, and that's how he changes the dynamics of the battle.
Yes.
Subhanallah. Is there any sense of how many enemy ships they captured or how many enemy soldiers they killed?
Yeah, I think Ernest Bradford might mention a number. The problem also is that there's a lot of propaganda on both sides. So the number, according to Barbarossa, according to his own account, he said that they destroyed multiple ships, and he says that it was a clear victory. The European sources say otherwise. They say that there's very little loss on the side of the Europeans. So Allah knows best. This is the kind of challenge of rewriting history and who controls the narrative of history.
Does the European
but also worth noting, so this is one of the most fascinating parts of the battle. In those days, the naval battles were determined by the wind, right? Because the ships had sails. They didn't have motors like we do today. So the battle is determined by the wind and what direction the wind is going. So in the beginning of the battle, the wind was unfavorable to the Muslims. It was going towards the Muslims. So Khairuddin Barbarossa, they say about him, he was Waliullah. Right? He was from the Awliya, very pious man. And you could say that that was a connection. The Ottoman soldiers generally were all into tasawwuf and Islamic spirituality. Right? That was part of their training, and it was part of their identity. Right? Worshipping Allah and remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and having that special relationship. So Khairuddin Barbarossa, noticing that the wind is going against him, he takes a few verses of the Quran, writes them, and throws them in the water. And immediately the direction of the wind starts changing, and it's in the favor of the Muslims.
Subhanallah.
Yeah, so kind of a move of the Khalifa Umar bin Khattab.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
And I dare say that would be mentioned in European sources.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing actually I wanted to ask here is
this you could say you asked me why I chose this book. This is one of the main reasons I chose the book, because the Islamic perspective is shared here in detail. In fact, if the Europeans were to read this, they would completely write it off, and they would probably make fun of it.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask here, a lot of Muslims, they try to stay like objective and say, okay, why should we trust our own sources? Why not? Like we should look at Western sources too. And like, can you speak to that a little bit? Like, Orientalist sources versus Muslim sources, which one should we trust? One in terms of academics and one in terms of like, just who you consider a person should consider more trustworthy in terms of recording.
So I'm going to paraphrase what the author of Ghazawat Khairuddin Barbarossa himself says, the biography of Khairuddin Barbarossa. The author, his name is Muradi Rais. And in the introduction, he says, look, all the events that I'm narrating here, we have seen with our own eyes. We were there. We were with Khairuddin Barbarossa. We were there for the Battle of Preveza. We were there for all these other battles. We were with him for 16 years. So there's multiple people here. We can all verify to the authenticity of what's being said here. And we were witnesses. And I think the difference is, even Ernest Bradford, he passed away maybe 100 years ago, and he didn't have access to the earliest sources. So if you only so yes, the European sources, some of them do discuss Barbarossa as well, but it's from a very biased perspective. It's from a very biased perspective. There were individuals that wrote about Barbarossa even in the 1500s from the Spanish side, but at that time the problem was both sides were going at war with one another. So being objective is very difficult when you're in battle with the other side.
Yeah, I think there's always going to be bias involved, regardless whether it's from the Muslim source or from the other source. I think it comes down to who is actually in line with the sources and who's closer to the eyewitnesses. I mean, in this case, there's a clear eyewitness. So whoever's narrative kind of fits that. Now, I don't know. That's actually one of the questions that I had, was that the Europeans, as they're telling the story, what are they relying on?
So they're relying mostly on European sources. And as I mentioned, that's a challenge. Ernest Bradford doesn't even know Arabic. He doesn't know Arabic. He didn't know Ottoman Turkish. So he really restricted himself in the sources. At the same time, I will say, from looking at European books, Ernest Bradford's book, The Sultan's Admiral, is fairly well written. Right? Yeah. You can say he was a fan of Barbarossa, and the way he's written the book, he's written it in a fairly positive light.
Like he tried to do justice to him.
He tried. Yeah. He tried. And he starts off saying, I went to the statue of Barbarossa in Turkey, and he talks about, so you can tell that he's enamored by Khairuddin Barbarossa.
Yeah, he had a whole career around the Mediterranean as a military man as well, Bradford himself, and I guess that's kind of what stoked his interest in Barbarossa.
Yeah. So that was very interesting as well. He said most of the places that Barbarossa writes about, I have been there with my own sailing ship.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. One other thing that you mentioned about Sulaiman al-Qanuni, right? You mentioned that one great thing about him was he saw the potential in him, right? In Khairuddin Barbarossa, and a lot of times people will take the credit away from a leader, and they'll just say that, it was actually his right hand man or whatever. someone under him who actually raised him to that level. But the reality is, like, even the leader seeing potential in someone and giving them free reign to operate after seeing that potential, that's actually the job of a leader, and he deserves credit for that. Yeah.
And many, I mean, we could spend another hour talking about Sultan Suleiman Qanuni. He was a very unique person. Yeah, he had from all the Ottoman rulers, he was extremely very unique, and what he accomplished in his period of time, it's unimaginable. Really, it's unimaginable.
So, any final things that you want to mention before we wrap this up, about any message to the youth? You know, the masculinity enamored youth.
Yeah. So I will briefly share another project. This is I haven't told both of you about it. It's, I would say, this rivals the Barbarossa book. So perhaps many of you have seen The Real Story of Dracula. Shibli Zaman a while ago wrote this online.
Yeah.
I think it went viral. The story went viral about Dracula, the real story of Dracula, Vlad the Impaler, and his brother Radu.
Yeah.
So I mean, the story is so it's right out of the pages of a really, I would say, a soap opera or a drama. There's two brothers. They were both sent from the king of Hungary. They were sent to Istanbul to grow up as to become Ottoman soldiers. One of them rebels and fights the Ottoman Empire his whole life. Of course, Vlad the Impaler, and he kills thousands of Ottoman soldiers. And the other brother is the good brother, Radu. His name was Radu. He took on his brother and captured his brother. So these two brothers are fighting on different sides of the battlefield, but they're both brothers. So,
yeah, that's an interesting story. I've seen that before. I heard about that history.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm looking forward to, inshallah, what Mufti Sahab will write regarding that as well.
So what Shibli Zaman did, may Allah reward him, he started going back to the Ottoman sources, and he wrote about 10 pages. Right. So his articles about maybe 10 or 15 pages. It was translated into multiple languages and went viral. So what I did, I have contacts now. I've established some good contacts in Turkey. So going back to the original sources, I was able to compile about 150 pages on Vlad the Impaler and his brother from the original Turkish sources, from Ottoman Turkish. So I have a team of people who have started translating that. So inshallah, that will be a goal as well. The real story of Vlad the Impaler and his brother from Ottoman sources, inshallah.
You should just call it The Real Story of Dracula.
Inshallah.
I think that, yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing that you even
but there's a lot more. I think what I'm learning is that it's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more information, and I think if there's an interest within the community, I think we'll see a lot more information translated in English, inshallah.
Mufti Sahab, one more question that came to my mind that maybe students of knowledge or scholars can actually benefit from, or really anybody, right? Like, if anybody wants to follow the same path, right? Because a lot of people, when they seek Islamic knowledge, they think people think maybe the only thing you can do is be imam, or like there's a very narrow number of jobs that you can do. But in a way, you can be entrepreneurial in this as well, right? So what you're doing is very innovative. So how can you give a message to students of knowledge and scholars, and maybe open up our mind, like, if we want to do something like this, if somebody wants to pursue a project, how should they go about doing that?
Yes. So I think it's the need is for a collaboration, taking the resources of the Muslim Ummah, right? So there's another project I'm working on, but time will not permit me to go into detail. But taking resources from the Muslim community, right? So, for example, we have some wealthy donors, and we have some generous Muslims, mashallah, in America, who will give who will donate for projects. So, for example, I started off last year. I started off with $250,000, right? So there was a donation by a few generous individuals. So I started off with that. Then I have translators. I've identified the translators overseas. I've identified people specializing in Arabic proofreading. I've identified English translators as well. So I've identified a team of individuals. But the goal is not every alim or a student of knowledge can become an imam. but now looking for different ways and looking for flexible ways to use those imams, to use the scholars, and give them flexible employment. Give them flexible employment, so it's a win-win. They have a halal job that gives them flexibility. They can work on their at their own pace, and then the work gets done, and then you have different projects coming out for the Muslim Ummah.
And
I
also,
think that's an angle that a lot of people don't usually think about when they think of where they should put their money, and that's actually to put it into academic ventures or academic sort of projects. And I think that's something that's needs to be done more often.
In fact, I'll share with you guys. It's the month of Ramadan, inshallah. Hopefully, some of our viewers are have some concern for this and are interested in this. So, kind of related, there's a excellent muhakkik scholar. So here I'm referring to a kind of a research scholar in Pakistan. I was amazed by his work. But he specializes in takhrij, and I think he was a student of Abdul Rashid Nomani. So excellent scholar. One of my friends recommended him to me, but I've seen his work. Excellent scholar, top-notch scholar. So I'm just sharing with you. So I hired him from using the $250,000. I hired him to work on 2 books, right, last year, and he teaches at a madrasa, but he's going through some financial issues, and it's difficult for him. So for one of the books that he worked on, I gave him $2,500, right, and he did an excellent job. He fully deserved that money. Then he asked me for upfront money from one of the other books he's working on. So when I sent him the money, it was 1 million rupees. That's only $4,000. That's nothing. For him, it's 1 million rupees. And he sent me a picture. He's like, this is the renovation of my house. This is how it's helped me, this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, brother, Sheikh, you've earned that money fully. You've done more than enough. But I think this is the challenge with the Muslim Ummah. Putting our resources together and then using them in the best ways and then hiring them for projects. And then it's a win-win for everyone.
I think like it's also like what you're doing is like traveling, building contacts. Like every time you meet someone, you're thinking, what potential does this person have, right? You're trying to understand and building this network of people. And then also when an idea does come to your mind, then you have what is required, right? So networking, contact building, and working with donors. So it's not like necessarily these things don't have to be like a one-man show, right? A lot of it is working with the community, and that's how these projects are done.
Yes,
Community effort, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give tawfiq, inshallah, and help. Inshallah, I just want to end off by encouraging everyone to inshallah buy the book when it's published. What's the publish date?
Inshallah, it's still a work in progress. So White Thread Press, Mufti Abdul Rahman Manghera, they've agreed to publish the book. And I'm going to submit a copy to Mufti Abdul Rahman, inshallah, hopefully in the next few weeks, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Everyone keep your eyes open and peeled for that, inshallah, and try to get your hands on a hard copy of the book. And we hope that, inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives tawfiq to Mufti Sahib to complete the other projects as well. And we look forward to benefiting from his experience, mashallah, and his work. And keep us in your du'as, inshallah. And is there anything that you want to add before we close off the session?
Final words.
I think just the final thoughts. Islamic history is so vast and it's so beautiful. I really hope, inshallah, may Allah reward Ihya project and inshallah both of you. I really hope that we can revive our Islamic history. And there's so many more heroes. There's so much more to learn. I think that's the beauty. There's so much more to learn. And I think the most exciting part of it is we're right in the middle of things. We're right in the thick of things. We're at a time in the world where a lot of new books are being published, a lot of new knowledge is being found, and inshallah, it is extremely exciting. I hope, inshallah, that we can benefit, inshallah.
Musab, if you want to add anything before we close the program.
Jazakumullah khairan, inshallah, we will end with that, and I'll just give a reminder to the viewers to like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you have any thoughts. And Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam
wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.